You know that moment when someone crosses a line they should never have crossed, when they say something so out of pocket that even they know they messed up the second it leaves their mouth. Stephen A. Smith just had that moment, and Ja Morant made sure the whole world knew it. On ESPN's First Take, Stephen A. decided to tell America that NBA players don't want to sign with Memphis because they don't feel safe in the city. He name-dropped Jimmy Butler, claimed he had inside sources, and basically painted Memphis as some kind of war zone that's scaring away talent. Bad move, Stephen A., really bad move. Because within hours, Ja Morant was on X firing back with everything he had. Talking about the Grizz more than the finals with these cap sources, he posted, calling out Stephen A.'s bogus reporting while the NBA finals were literally happening. But here's where it gets wild. Ja didn't just tweet and disappear. This man went full scorched earth mode, defending his city like his life depended on it. And honestly, Memphis needed that energy. Stephen A. tried to clap back with his usual, "So this is what we're doing now?" energy, but it was too late. The damage was done and Ja had the receipts. This isn't just about basketball. This is about a young superstar refusing to let some talking head from New York disrespect his home. This is about authenticity versus manufactured controversy. This is about what happens when someone who actually lives it checks someone who just talks about it. Drop a comment right now. Do you think Stephen A. crossed the line talking about Memphis like that, or was he just keeping it real? Because this debate is splitting the basketball world in half. Stephen A.'s Memphis meltdown. Let's break down exactly what Stephen A. Smith said that got the entire city of Memphis ready to run him out of town. It started during a First Take segment about whether the Grizzlies should move on from Ja Morant. Instead of sticking to basketball, Stephen A. went completely off the rails. Nobody wants to be in Memphis. I know. They've told me. That's all I'm saying. Cats like Jimmy Butler and others don't feel like it's the safest environment. Hold up. Jimmy Butler. When did Jimmy Butler become Stephen A.? Has personal source on Memphis safety. The man has never even played for Memphis, never lived there, never spent significant time there. But somehow he's Stephen A.'s expert witness on why players avoid the Grizzlies. Stephen A. doubled down, saying if the Grizzlies want to recruit NBA stars, the local police need to do better. This man really sat on national television and told an entire city's police force how to do their job. Here's the thing about Stephen A. Smith. He's built his entire career on hot takes and manufactured outrage. But this wasn't a hot take about basketball. This was a character assassination of an entire city, disguised as NBA analysis. And the timing? Chef's kiss of terrible decision-making. The NBA Finals were happening, featuring incredible performances from players like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Pascal Siakam, and Stephen A. chose to spend his platform trashing Memphis instead of celebrating basketball excellence. The reaction from Memphis locals was immediate and brutal. Longtime residents called his comments inappropriate and gross. The Greater Memphis Chamber had to issue statements. Local media personalities went off. But here's what Stephen A. didn't count on. He picked the wrong city and the wrong player to mess with. Memphis has been through everything. Economic struggles, natural disasters, social challenges, and they've always fought back with pride and resilience. And Ja Morant? This is a dude who's never backed down from anything in his life. You think he's going to let some New York media personality trash his home on national television? Even other media personalities called Stephen A.'s comments irresponsible. Chris Vernon and Tony Allen, people who actually know Memphis basketball, had to step up and provide actual context instead of manufactured controversy. Stephen A. thought he was just making another hot take for clicks and engagement. What he actually did was wake up a sleeping giant and give Ja Morant all the ammunition he needed. Real talk. Have you ever had someone who doesn't know your city try to tell the world what it's really like? How did that make you feel? Let me know in the comments. Jay's digital destruction. When Ja Morant decided to respond to Stephen A. Smith, he didn't just tweet once and move on. This man orchestrated a masterclass in digital warfare that had NBA Twitter absolutely losing their minds. It started simple enough, talking about the Grizz more than the finals laughing emoji, with these cap emoji our sources. But don't let the casual tone fool you. This was a calculated strike at Stephen A.'s credibility. Ja was pointing out something everybody knew but nobody was saying. Stephen A. was spending more time manufacturing Memphis drama than covering the actual NBA Finals. While Shai, Pascal, and other stars were putting on a show, Stephen A. was in his feelings about a city he doesn't even know. But Ja wasn't done. He followed up with posts that had the entire basketball world taking screenshots. He questioned Stephen A.'s sources, called out the timing, and basically told America that if you want to know about Memphis, maybe ask someone who actually lives there. The genius of Ja's response wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. No long paragraphs, no press conferences, no publicist-approved statements. Just raw, authentic pushback from someone who's actually walked those Memphis streets. And the basketball world took notice. Players started liking Ja's posts. Fans started sharing them. Even people who aren't Grizzlies fans were supporting Ja because they recognized something real when they saw it. Stephen A. tried to respond with his typical condescending energy. "So this is what we're doing now, Ja Morant?" But it fell flat. You could practically hear the desperation in his tweet. Because here's what Stephen A. didn't understand. This wasn't just about basketball criticism. Ja took it personal because Stephen A. attacked his home, his people, his city. And when you go after Memphis, you're going after Ja Morant's whole identity. The social media battle revealed something deeper about modern sports media. You have old-school talking heads like Stephen A., who think they can say whatever they want without consequences. And you have new-school players like Ja, who have direct access to their audience and aren't afraid to use it. Ja's response wasn't just defending Memphis. It was showing other players that you don't have to accept disrespectful commentary just because it comes from ESPN. You can fight back, you can set the record straight, and you can win. The engagement numbers were insane. Ja's posts were getting retweeted, quoted, and shared at levels that most NBA content never reaches. Meanwhile, Stephen A.'s response was getting ratioed by people who could smell the desperation. Who won round one of this social media battle? Ja's authentic defense of his city, or Stephen A.'s attempt to maintain his hot-take authority? Drop your vote below. The Memphis Defense Force assembles. What happened next was something Stephen A. Smith definitely didn't see coming. The entire Memphis basketball community rallied around Ja Morant like he'd just called for backup in the most important game of his life. Jessica Benson, sports reporter for the Memphis Grizzlies and Grind City Media, came out swinging, calling Stephen A.'s comments inappropriate and gross. She didn't mince words about how his commentary was affecting the city, but it wasn't just media personalities. Former players, current coaches, local business leaders, everybody with any connection to Memphis basketball started speaking up, and they weren't just defending the city, they were exposing how little Stephen A. actually knows about what he was talking about. Chris Vernon and Tony Allen didn't just call Stephen A.'s comments irresponsible. They provided actual context, actual facts, actual perspective from people who've lived and worked in Memphis basketball. Here's what made this defense so powerful. These weren't just random people on Twitter. These were credible voices with real knowledge challenging Stephen A.'s manufactured narrative with actual expertise. The Memphis business community got involved too. Chamber of Commerce statements, tourism boards, local politicians. Everybody was pushing back against this idea that Memphis is some kind of NBA no-fly zone. And the fans? Man, the fans went absolutely nuclear. Memphis Grizzlies Twitter became a 24/7 Stephen A. Smith fact-checking operation. They were pulling up statistics, sharing positive Memphis stories, and basically showing the world what Stephen A. chose to ignore. But here's what really made this special. It wasn't just Memphis defending Memphis. Players from other teams started supporting Ja's stance, not necessarily agreeing with everything, but respecting his right to defend his home. The conversation started shifting from, "Is Memphis safe for NBA players?" to, "Why is Stephen A. Smith attacking cities instead of covering basketball?" Even neutral observers started calling out the absurdity of the whole situation. Here's a guy who's never lived in Memphis, never played professional basketball, never been part of NBA team operations, telling the world why NBA players make their decisions. Meanwhile, you have Ja Morant, who's actually lived it, actually played there, actually knows what he's talking about, and somehow his perspective is less valid than Stephen A.'s unnamed sources. The tide was turning and Stephen A. could feel it. His usual playbook of doubling down on controversial statements wasn't working, because this time he was up against organized, factual pushback from people with actual credibility. Memphis showed the world something important that day. When someone attacks your home, you don't just take it. You fight back with facts, with unity, and with the kind of authentic pride that can't be manufactured. Have you ever seen a city rally around their team and player like Memphis did for Ja? What's the most loyal fanbase moment you've witnessed? Share your stories. Stephen A.'s damage control disaster. When Stephen A. Smith realized his Memphis comments had blown up in his face, he did what he always does. He tried to spin his way out of trouble. But this time, his usual damage control playbook just made everything worse. The next day on First Take, Stephen A. was adamant that the Grizzlies were only a topic of conversation because they had just traded Desmond Bane. He tried to make it seem like his Memphis safety comments were just incidental to legitimate basketball analysis. But here's the problem with that excuse. Everybody saw the original segment. We all heard him spend way more time talking about Memphis safety than he spent talking about the actual basketball trade, The receipts were right there on video. Stephen A's Twitter response was even worse. "So this is what we're doing now, Ja Morant," he posted, trying to sound like the reasonable adult in the room. But the condescending tone just made him look more out of touch. The desperation was obvious. This is a man who's built his career on never backing down, never admitting he's wrong, always doubling down on his takes. But when faced with organized, factual pushback from an entire city, his usual tactics weren't working. He tried to pivot to his unnamed sources defense, claiming that players had actually told him they felt unsafe in Memphis. But when pressed for specifics, he couldn't provide any. Jimmy Butler's name got thrown around, but when has Jimmy Butler ever said anything publicly about Memphis safety? The basketball media world started paying attention to this pattern. Stephen A. making claims about player preferences without actual evidence, then hiding behind sources when challenged. It's one thing to have hot takes about basketball strategy, but making claims about entire cities based on unnamed sources is different. Even when he tried to clarify that he wasn't questioning Ja's talent, just his availability, it rang hollow. The damage was already done, and everybody could see he was backtracking. The worst part for Stephen A? Ja Morant wasn't backing down. Usually when Stephen A goes after someone, they either ignore it or respond once and move on. But Ja kept the pressure on, kept questioning the narrative, kept demanding accountability. When someone gets called out like this, should they double down or admit they were wrong? What would you have done in Stephen A's position? The ripple effects and bigger picture. This wasn't just a Twitter beef between a player and a talking head. What happened between Ja Morant and Stephen A. Smith exposed some serious issues with how sports media operates in 2025. First, it highlighted the power dynamics between traditional media and modern athletes. Stephen A. represents the old guard, guys who think they can say whatever they want about players and cities without consequences because they have the platform. But Ja represents the new reality, athletes who have direct access to their audience and aren't afraid to challenge narratives they disagree with. Social media has changed everything, and traditional media personalities are still figuring out how to adapt. The Memphis situation also raised questions about media responsibility. When you have a platform as big as First Take, do you have an obligation to be more careful about attacking entire cities? Should there be higher standards for claims made without evidence? Local Memphis residents felt the real impact of Stephen A's comments. These weren't just abstract basketball takes. They were statements that could affect the city's reputation, tourism, and economic development. The basketball world took notice too. Other players started paying attention to how Ja handled the situation. He showed that you don't have to just accept disrespectful commentary, even when it comes from major media figures. But maybe the most important impact was on the conversation about authenticity in sports media. Ja's response worked because it felt real, because it came from someone who actually knows what he's talking about, because it was rooted in genuine love for his city. Compare that to Stephen A's manufactured controversy, based on unnamed sources and unverifiable claims. The contrast couldn't be clearer. The Memphis defense also showed how communities can rally around their teams and players in the social media age. Instead of just accepting negative narratives, they fought back with facts, with organization, with unity. This whole situation might end up being a turning point for how sports media handles coverage of cities and communities. Maybe next time, talking heads will think twice before making sweeping statements about places they don't really know. And maybe, just maybe, other players will follow Ja's example and start holding media personalities accountable for their words. Do you think this changes how athletes will respond to media criticism going forward? Are we seeing a shift in the power dynamic between players and traditional sports media? Here's what we learned from watching Ja Morant absolutely demolish Stephen A. Smith's credibility in real time. Authenticity beats manufactured controversy every single time. Ja won this battle because he was fighting for something real, his home, his city, his people. Stephen A. was just trying to generate clicks and engagement with lazy, unverified takes. We also learned that the old rules of sports media don't apply anymore. You can't just say whatever you want about players and cities and expect no pushback. Athletes have platforms now, they have voices, and they're not afraid to use them. Memphis showed us something beautiful too. When someone attacks your community, you don't have to take it lying down. You can fight back with facts, with pride, with the kind of unity that Stephen A. Smith will never understand, because he's never been part of a community like that. The most important lesson: words have consequences. Stephen A. thought he was just making another hot take, but he ended up showing the world his own limitations. He attacked a city he doesn't know, based on sources he can't verify, and got checked by someone who actually lives the life he was talking about. Ja Morant didn't just defend Memphis, he showed other athletes how to handle disrespectful media coverage, Not with anger, not with personal attacks, but with facts, with authenticity, and with the kind of pride that can't be faked. Stephen A. Smith learned the hard way that you can't build a career on hot takes without eventually running into someone willing to call you on it, and when that someone is defending their home with the whole city behind them. Game over. Memphis 1. Stephen A. Smith 0. And it wasn't even close. What's your take on this whole situation? Did Ja handle it perfectly, or should he have stayed quiet? Let me know what you think, because this conversation is far from over.